Clark with Trikke Tampa. Today we're going to demonstrate how to change out the wheels on a T78 CS. So what we're going to do now is explain the different wheel types and sizes that will mount on the T78 CS. What comes on the CS out of the box is a 7-inch polyurethane wheel. It'll also mount the 8-inch polyurethane wheel as well as the 8.5-inch air tire. Now this goes for all three wheels, the back wheels as well as the front wheel. Now with 7-inch polyurethane wheel, the hub thickness on the wheel, the part that in here is a different thickness than the hub on the 8-inch poly or the 8.5-inch air tire. So what comes stock with the 78 CS is an 18mm frame to hub spacer on each side, and whenever we change out to the 8-inch poly, we're going to go to a 13mm spacer, frame to hub spacer, one on each side. So if you order an air wheel mod kit, you should get 4 spacers, 2 for each side. If you're changing out from the 7-inch polyurethanes to the 8-inch polyurethanes, you're going to need the 13mm spacers, and typically it is not included when you order just the poly wheels. So to give a little clarification on that, you can call us if you place an order and we can include the spacers if you do it online, or you can call us and place the order over the phone. So the tools that we're going to need for changing out the wheel sets on a T78 CS are 2 5mm. This is a 5mm T-handle, the 5mm end of a star wrench or a 456 wrench. We're going to need a 3mm for loosening the clamps on the brake cables, as well as an 8mm wrench. I'm going to use a socket. You can use an adjustable wrench or a regular 8mm wrench, but it is metric and it is 8mm. All right, as mentioned earlier, the T78 CS will mount a 7-inch polyurethane wheel, an 8-inch polyurethane wheel, or an 8.5-inch diameter air tire. As you can see, there are 3 different positions to mount the brake to accommodate for the different diameters of wheels. And what we're going to do is, when we take the 7-inch polyurethane wheel off, we're going to put the air tires on it, and we're going to go to the last hole at the top here, which would accommodate the 8.5-inch air tire. Like I said, the middle one is for the 8-inch polyurethane wheel, and then this one is for the 7-inch polyurethane wheel. Now we're going to remove the 7-inch polyurethane wheel from the back of the T78 CS. We're going to use 2 5mm. Get your spacers, point them off to the side. You can see, as I talked about earlier, there's a difference in spacer lengths. That's a 13mm. 18mm is only used for the 7-inch polyurethane wheel. So since we took the 7-inch polyurethane wheel off, we can set these way out of the way. And now what we're going to do is install the 8.5-inch air tire. I'm not going to show how to install the 8-inch polyurethane wheel. You know, it'd be kind of redundant because it's going to mount just like the 8.5-inch air tire, except it would go in the middle brake hole on the frame. So now what we need to do, move our brake axle, and I'm using the 5mm on this side and my 8mm socket on this side. And I'll tell you what, we're going to go ahead and take the brake cable loose. Actually, I like to take one of them all the way out. it'll make it a little easier to wrap the cable around. So now we've got our brake loose. What we're going to do, and this is very important, look at the brake spring. You can see how the spring wraps underneath the brake pad and hooks on the top of it. Theoretically, it should, this spring should set in that slot right there. It's not necessarily going to. It's just very important that to cause the spring action on the brake pad, that when you put the brake pad back on, we hook it in up underneath the spring. So we're going to pull the brake axle out, set it to the side. We now have the loose brake pad. That's your brake pad. Now look at the spring. The easiest way not to confuse how the spring goes, don't take it all the way out of the frame. You're going to have to move the end of these springs up to the third hole. Now there's smaller diameter holes for the wire of the spring to go into that corresponds to the brake axle position we're going into. So we're going all the way up to the first one. So we're going to take the spring on one side and just move it up and come around here, ready? And now I'm going to take the spring on this side and move it up. So I just moved it from here up to here. So now our spring is in the right position for when we hook the brake pad back. So now that we've got the spring moved up to the position for the 8.5-inch air tire, or air wheel set, we're going to put the brake back in. So typically your hex head will go on the outside of the trike. It's not really important, but it's just good habit. We're going to put the, there you go. We're going to now come through the hole, through the spring. Now we're going to take our brake pad, because we've got to go through the hole of the brake pad. We're going to hook the brake pad up and under. Now you have to feed the axle through the brake pad. You can see it's going to come all the way through here, and we're going to go through the inside of the spring on the other side, making sure we get good camera angles. Might have to back up a little bit. So you can see where I'm starting to feed the brake axle through. I'm going to line it up with the hole on this side of the frame. And I'm pushing it, and it came through. All right, so we've just fed the axle through the brake, through the frame, have the brake pad comes in underneath the spring. Now we're going to put the nut back on the brake axle. And this is actually a very important step also. A lot of people don't realize. So we've got the nut started. Put your 5mm hex head back on that side. Use your wrench, socket wrench, adjustable wrench, combination wrench, whatever. Now we're going to tighten this nut up. Keep in mind, you only want this nut to go down till it just touches the frame. This is a lock nut. It's a Teflon lock nut, so there's Teflon inside that nut that's going to lock it in, so you don't have to tighten it up real tight. And we're just going to take it down till we get plenty of the threads into the Teflon of the nut. And that way the nut's not going to come loose, and we're just going to touch the frame. It just now touched the frame. If you tighten that down too tight, you're going to squeeze the dropouts on the frame in tight, where it makes it really hard to get your wheel on and off, because you've squeezed the dropouts narrower than the width of the hubs and the spacers in combination. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to install the first 8.5-inch air wheel. I recommend airing the tire up before installing it. It's just a lot easier. And I'm going to take these up to 90-ish. Like a little extra pressure in the tires. Put your valve cap back on. Real important also, it's not super important, but there is a rotation or a direction on the tread of the tire. Quick, easy reference, look up at your front wheel. You want to stand behind me, Eddie? Is look up at your front wheel and see the direction, see how they're pointing down? That's what we're going to do with the rear tire. It's going to point down. So that's a quick, easy reference. It's no big deal if it's on backwards, but you know, just making the trike look uniform and doing it in a professional way. So front tire, the treads are pointing down, so we're going to put the back tires on with the tread pointing down. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get the 8.5-inch air wheel set installed. Start your axle, put your 13mm spacer on it. Make sure we've got the tread direction in the right direction. Now, I had to move the brake clamp out of the way because it was interfering with me putting the wheel on. But you can see we're just up against the brake. Don't worry about it. You might have to push on the wheel a little bit to get the axle lined up. So now I'm lifting the back end of the trike up a little bit, getting the axle started into the first bearing of the hub. Now we're going to put the other side in, but you'll notice the axle's not going in all the way. The reason being is there is a spacer inside the hub of this wheel that goes between the inner races of the bearings on the inside of the inside hub of the wheel. So what we have to do is align it up. Two ways to do that. You have an Allen wrench or a hex wrench. You can simply stick it in, wobble it around, and it'll line up and you can push the axle through. You know, sometimes they're a little harder than others. I have this little guy right here that I've manufactured, and I simply stick it in, I push it until I touch the axle, and then I can start pushing the axle through that way. Okay. So now we're going to you might need to come over here, Eddie. So we got it started, and now I'm just going to push the axle on through this next spacer, and then line it up with the axle hole in the frame. Now we're going to take our axle bolt, we're going to start it in. Take a 5mm on the opposite side, which is the fixed side of the axle. And now we're just going to crank in until it bottoms out. So you want to tighten this up good and snug.